welcome to Angela's Journey to Health, video number 2. And today I decided it would be a really good idea to interview my other half. And that's because he's the one who really got me into fruitarianism, and he's like my raw food guru. So I thought it would be really nice to hear his tips, and it might help somebody out there. Okay, so Stephen, what got you into raw food?
Raw food? Are we not starting from the very beginning, because raw food came a bit later on?
Okay, yes. So talk to us about your journey, how it began.
My actual journey started with the China study. Well, before that I watched a couple of documentaries, Forks Over Knives, Food Matters, things like that, but I was actually ill. Not seriously ill, but I was off work for a couple of weeks because I had what we believed was probably quinsy. My throat was all swollen up to the point where I couldn't drink, I couldn't eat. Drinking was very painful, you know, talking was barely possible. So anyway, I was off for a couple of weeks. I ended up going to the doctor and being prescribed antibiotics. But while I was off work, I started watching documentaries, and like I say, I ended up watching Forks Over Knives and Food Matters. The Forks Over Knives documentary led me to the China study book, and yeah, within kind of, I say around about 20 pages of reading the China study, I sat and read that. Just got started one night. The following day, I was emptying my freezer of all the meat, getting rid of all my dairy products. I basically went vegan overnight after reading just a few pages of the China study, and obviously I went on to finish the book, and I started to follow a whole food plant-based diet at that time, and at that time I actually thought that was the healthiest diet we could possibly do as humans. I kind of felt like, oh wow, this is the healthiest possible diet, and then I realised that there's a lot more that there is to learn. There's a lot more to learn. So I carried on reading, and I read, at that time I was reading a lot of Joel Fuhrman books, still kind of the whole food plant-based kind of books, and then I think I was watching YouTube one day, just searching for like vegans and people who are into that, and I started watching a channel, it was OK Raw, and so I started to kind of understand that raw food is actually more helpful than cooked food. I think it was an interview that John Kohler was doing with different people, and they were all saying, oh, I eat most of my calories from fruit, and at that time I thought, how can people only eat fruit or mostly eat fruit? Like, that doesn't make sense. Like, no, you can't possibly live off fruit. And they were all saying that they mostly followed the 80-10-10 diet, and I thought, what's the 80-10-10 diet? So I googled it, found it on Amazon, so I bought a copy.
And who's that by?
That's by Dr. Douglas Graham. So I ended up reading that. Or in fact, I lie, because I got it as an audiobook first, so I listened to the audiobook, and then in fact bought the book afterwards and reread it. But after I read that kind of blew me away, and that made so much sense. Like the China study made a lot of sense. That made me realise that meat and dairy products really aren't suitable for human consumption. And then when I
because isn't that a book about casein?
The China study is several different studies. The main one, the one that is the China study, is a several decade study conducted in China, basically about the consumption of meat versus kind of more plant-based products in China at that time. Because
and didn't they find that you can turn on and off cancer?
well, that's with casein and dairy products, but they also did a study which was, like I say, a couple of decades long, and it was talking about how people who ate a predominantly vegetable-based diet, plant-based diet, they suffered a lot less cancer, and as you introduce more meat into your diet, the more cancer those people got. And it's just a diagonal line, like literally down here, less meat you ate, or eating 0 to no meat, 0 to little meat. The cancer rate was very low, and as that increased, the cancer rate increased along with it. It was very, it's a significant part of that book. And then they also talk about, this is T. Colin Campbell, and he also talks about the study with casein and being able to turn off cancer in rats. I believe it was just when they used only 20% casein, they were able to turn off the gene and then the cancer, and then when they used, was it 80%?
Yeah.
It's been a long time. That was the first book I read in this whole journey. But yeah.
Then the cancer risk goes up.
Yeah, when they used aflatoxin, which was that was the carcinogen which caused the cancer, but they were able to turn it on and off through diet, basically.
So this is the book that got Stephen thinking about veganism. So tell us about what your average day's food was like before.
Well, actually, right before I changed, I was eating more meat than I've ever eaten. Because funnily enough, I was never, growing up, never a huge meat eater. I didn't really like meat growing up. Like, I only really liked the processed meats. If it looked like sort of like the animal, or it looked like a slice of actual meat, it really didn't do anything for me. Yeah. So growing up, I didn't like meat that much. I did like cheese and dairy products a lot, though. Ice cream, cheese, these kind of things. And then I actually kind of learned to like meat later in life, kind of teenage years, or I'm not sure exactly what age I started to eat more meat. But anyway, I still didn't, when I lived on my own, so when I first moved out of my parents' house, I didn't actually buy that much meat. I bought dairy products, but I wasn't that bothered about meat. I didn't feel like meat needed to be in a meal like a lot of people do. However, I actually at that time started to do weightlifting. And when you do weightlifting, you're reading all these magazines like Men's Health and things, and all their recommendations is, like half a plate needs to be of meat, and they talk about how many grams of protein you need per kilo of body weight and things, and you get suckered into all that information. So I actually went from eating pretty low amounts of meat to actually eating crazy amounts of meat, where I was eating meat for breakfast, lunch and dinner every day.
And how did that make you feel?
At that time, I guess at that time it was normal, so it's not like I specifically felt awful. I didn't know I felt awful. It was more later I realised how awful I felt once I changed from eating that. But at the time, it was just normal to me. But I was drinking a lot of alcohol as well, which I had been doing for several years.
So nowadays, what is your typical food day?
Nowadays, my typical food day is it can change. There's no typical day in a way. I mean, I have staples. We always have bananas and oranges in. But
papayas.
you particularly like,
Papayas.
well, we both really like papayas, but you definitely like papayas.
Rambutans.
Yeah, just any fruit really, any ripe, raw fruit is what we eat. I mean, I don't generally eat at breakfast, but I do have orange juice, freshly squeezed orange juice.
So, why fruitarianism? Because I know a lot of the followers on my page always ask me, okay, so you're a vegan, but why are you fruitarian?
The reason that I eat a fruitarian diet is because I believe that humans are fruitarians. You know, we're frugivores. Most of us don't realise that every animal in nature has a diet that they
are designed to eat.
They're biologically designed to eat that diet, and humans we've kind of through both fire, you know, heat, and then also processing, we've changed our natural diet. So, like, for instance, meat would never really wouldn't appeal to 99% of people unless we cook it. So the idea of eating meat is very off-putting.
And you don't look at a goat and think, oh, I'd love to eat that goat.
No, and this is what the 80-10-10 diet talks about, is that kind of we don't salivate when we look at animals. You know, we look at them and we actually think, it'll either be a big scary lion, or it'll be a very cute bunny rabbit or a dog, but we don't look at it and start salivating and and then want to chase after it and catch it with our claws, which we don't have, and bite into it with our
canines, which we don't really have.
Well, we don't have
because our
carnivores'
teeth. Yeah, our teeth aren't designed to rip into fish.
No, we have to use
forks and knives.
Tools, and then we have to use fire in order to make it even palatable to us. Before we even put it on fire, it's very much not appealing at all, and the smell is not appealing
whilst
at all.
Whilst it's cooking, it's disgusting.
The raw smell, of flesh, it's just not appealing. And like carnivores they don't just eat the meat around the bone and then leave it. They eat everything. They eat the blood and
bone marrow.
Yeah, it's just. So humans are predominantly frugivores. I mean, that's what appeals to us in nature.
And the fruit, when it's on the tree, smells good, tastes good. So it's
a gustatory delight to us. I mean, who can say that that doesn't look appealing to us? And it's for it's kind of so obvious. You go all your life and you think that it's normal to eat all these cooked foods and meat and dairy products and things, and then when you kind of stop to think, it makes sense that it's actually very abnormal to eat these foods. Like fruit is the perfect nutrition. We run on simple sugars. It has just the right amount of protein and fat for what we need.
And I think what has come out from my page is that a lot of people, when they message me, are worried about eating a lot of fruit, and they question my health because they say fruit contains a lot of sugar. So can you talk to us about the sugar side of things and put their minds to rest?
Well, fruit does contain a lot of sugar, and that's a good thing. I mean, we need to run on. Humans do run on sugar. That's what our cells, every cell in our body runs on, is sugar. Is carbohydrates, simple sugars. It's not, we don't run on starches. We have to. They're very difficult to break. We have to convert them into simple sugars, but they're very complex. And we don't run on protein. We need very little protein. People get worried about sugar because we've as humans, again, with processing, we've refined sugar, and we think of sugar as that white stuff that flows in, you know, that we buy in bags and add to everything under the sun. Every processed food has salt, sugar or fat added to it, and we're told to fear sugar, you know, that we shouldn't use too much. But there's a difference between the white powder that we call sugar and the sugar that's in fruit, and
the sugar in fruit is called fructose, isn't it?
and it's not just sugar, it's accompanied by all the other things that fruit contains, all the fibre, the water, the nutrients, you know, the vitamins and everything, you know, phytochemicals, everything that's in fruit.
And actually, like I've been saying on my page about my recent blood tests, and I was saying that all my life I've had quite high glucose levels, and that was from eating refined sugar. But since I've switched to eating a lot of fruit, you'd expect there to be maybe loads and loads of sugar running through my body, bad sugar, and really high glucose levels, but actually they're normal, aren't they?
Yeah, and I mean, I've done experiments myself where I've used blood glucose meters, you know, just tested it before and after big, you know, large meals of fruit, and it's just very, it's very normal, you know. People kind of worry that you've just had a big sugar rush, and that's not the case, you know. It's because of the fibre and everything else there, it takes, we're designed to eat fruit, you know. People just simply don't kind of, it's kind of funny that it's so abnormal, the idea of living off fruit, and yet it's, if we was in nature, we took away all our tools and, you know, our fire swords, you know, and you said kind of like, there you go, kind of what would you live off? Like, people would start picking the fruit and eating that, you know, they wouldn't try and be buying
and
into
you
rabbits.
can tell, yeah, exactly, and you can tell that fruitarianism is more natural than the standard diet, because, you know, you didn't find a KFC or a McDonald's when the first humans were around, did you?
Well, when you walk through a supermarket,
donuts growing on
if you walk
trees.
through a supermarket, there's aisles and like endless aisles of just tins and packages and things, and it's like that just isn't food.
That's convenience, food-like substances.
We've created a really, it's just such a abnormal way of eating now, and, you know, the last 100 years has just been a huge downfall, but just since the time that we, you know, say 10,000 years ago, or when we started using fire, you know, it's still relatively short, it's still relatively new to us, the idea of cooking food, in the grand scheme of things, you know. If you look at the time, you know, the length of time that it took for us to evolve, cooking is very recent, and things like processed food, you know, tinned food, and is like far more recent, you know, in the last 100 years or so, and before that, you know, even things like GMOs and using chemical fertilizers and things on food is only the last 100 years, so it's...
Okay, so I've asked you about the fruitarianism. I was going to ask you about raw food. Why is it that you don't think cooking food is a good idea?
Well, there's obviously, I would say that there's good, you know, there's kind of bad to kind of not as bad, and then good but not best kind of thing. Like, there's different stages, because I wouldn't just say, I don't just want to say like, you know, people just stop cooking food, it's terrible for you, and, you know, in a way I wouldn't be lying in saying that cooked food is not good for us, because cooked food isn't the best for us. So anything less than best isn't good, in my opinion, kind of. But the point I'd like to make is that things like frying food is, you know, that's high heat, so the higher the heat, the more damage you do to the food that you're cooking. So, you know, when we cook food, like the example I like to use sometimes is that if you took something that we class as an edible food, and we add it into an oven. We turned it up to, whatever heat we turn it up to, but 200 degrees Celsius. We leave it, let's say we leave it overnight. When we come back to that, it's been reduced to just ash. Now, we would never look at that ash and say,
that's yummy.
That's satisfying. We'd look at that. If we was to even try that, we'd know instantaneously that was poisonous. That has no nutritional value to us whatsoever. Now, when we actually put food into the oven and take it out, we obviously take it out much earlier than before it's reduced to ash. However, the start of that process has begun when we've added it into the oven. We've started to
introduce carcinogen.
We've started to damage the food. I mean, through adding heat, we're burning our food. And it doesn't matter what stage you take it out of the oven, whether it's that final stage when it's reduced to ash, or somewhere in between when it's still kind of looks like food, but we've done so much damage that we can't even really, I mean, things like vitamins, like most vitamins are lost through heat.
Yeah, like when you boil vegetables, all the vitamins are coming out in the hot water.
Yeah, well, the water-soluble vitamins end up in the water and we don't consume them, and a lot of them are damaged anyway and lost with the heat itself.
So it's like you're just eating to fill yourself up, but you're not actually filling your body with any nutritional value.
We eat for several different reasons. We eat to get the water, we eat to get the fibre, we eat to get all the nutrition that's in that food. And if we've cooked that food and kind of, especially at high heat, we've lost so much of the goodness from the food, we lose the water from the food.
And that's probably why they recommend to drink 2 litres of water a day, because the standard eater doesn't really get a lot of water-rich food. Whereas if you're on a fruitarian diet, because all the fruit, most of the fruit has got water in it, you don't have to drink as much because the water is coming from the fruit.
Well, we're really not water drinking animals, and the fact is that we could probably live entirely off fruit itself and never drink, and in fact people do that. I do drink, and in fact you see I'm drinking now, but we could get all our water content from the food that we
and we
consume.
don't drink as much, do we? And I've noticed that like in a morning, if I've had quite a lot of fruit for say breakfast and lunch but not drunk a lot, I'm still going to the bathroom several times as if I had drunk litres of water.
I go to the bathroom more now than I ever have done, and I used to drink far more than I do now. The fact is that when we eat a cooked food meal, because our bodies need water in order to help digest that meal. The water should be part of that meal, but when we cook food, it's devoid of that water, and then we end up having to drink. And then also when we add salt and things, again, salt is just poisonous to us. Our body needs water in order to suspend it in its cells to kind of dilute it, dilute the poison basically, so we end up retaining water. So when we start removing salt from our diet, we end up losing a lot of this retained water.
But no one's saying not to cook food, it's more about steaming food.
It's about steps, about taking steps towards I'd always recommend to people to start introducing more fruit into their diet, and a breakfast is a very good place to start doing that. I mean, I think that if you're going to eat cooked food, you should have it at the end of the day, and try and eat as much fruit as you can during the day, like in my opinion. I think that because cooked food takes a lot longer to digest, so if you start your day off on cooked food, whether that's, you might not see it as a cooked food, but if you eat a breakfast cereal, that's still a cooked food, even if you're having it cold, and it takes a long time to digest, and it hasn't finished digesting by the time you eat your lunch, and then you add that to your stomach, and your body can't deal with all the, you know, our bodies are only designed to really digest very basic food combinations.
Because we've spoken about in the past how when we have had, so I remember when I used to have a cooked meal at lunchtime as a teacher, and then I went into class and I felt really sleepy and tired for those next 2 hours. And you've been talking to me about how when you introduce cooked food into your body, what happens to your white blood cells.
Yeah, well, we develop leukocytosis, which is when our white blood cells kind of double or triple in count. And you know, our white blood cells, they are our defense. They are our house cleaners, basically. So if by doing something we see a rise in white blood cells, we know that what we're doing is harmful to us. And every time a person eats a cooked food meal and leukocytosis occurs, we know that just through that one fact alone that it's damaging to our bodies.
And that's why we feel sleepy, because our digestion is having to work overtime to try and push that food through.
Well, we only have...
And can't focus on anything else, really.
We only have so much nerve energy, so we can only focus on, you know, we only have so much energy to focus on different things in our body. So, for instance, if we eat a very fatty and difficult to digest, very low water, meal, for instance, our body is going to take a long time to digest, and so our body's going to be using all its, not all, but it's going to be focusing its nerve energies towards digesting that meal, and then our body, we're going to feel very sluggish because we don't have any energy to do anything else. And that's when people go into food comas and go and lay down and watch TV and things.
Have a food baby.
It's because we've eaten ourselves into a stupor. Yeah. And
so, in a nutshell, what have been the advantages of you switching to a fruitarian diet?
There are so many benefits and advantages. I mean,
to you personally, though.
For me, it's a case of much more energy. You know, like we've just discussed, in terms of not feeling that that lethargic feeling once you've just had a big meal. You know, I can eat a big meal in terms of how, you know, 10, 12 bananas or 6, 7, 8 mangoes or whatever, and that's a lot of quantity. But I don't feel, you know, I don't eat till I'm stuffed. You know, I eat till I'm satisfied, and I feel great after the meal. I mean, I don't mean like you should go and run a marathon after eating 12 bananas, but I feel energetic. You know, like when I'm at work and I eat my raw fruit meal and I see everyone around me eating their big cooked chips and chicken and whatever they eat, gravy and things, and then literally all of them are saying, "Oh, I really don't feel like continuing with work now," and it makes me laugh because I just feel the same as what I did before I went in, other than not hungry anymore. But my hunger's gone, but I don't feel lethargic or anything. I just get on with my day like it was normal. But
so more energy.
More energy.
What would benefit number 2 be?
Benefit, I mean, you'll lose weight, you know.
So how much did you weigh before you started this?
The funny thing is that when I went vegan, I ended up I went to like a plant-based diet, but however I was eating, it's been a long learning journey for me. So for instance, when I went to a plant-based diet, I was buying bags and bags of nuts.
Which you should eat in moderation.
Yeah, I mean, like I sort of even pretty much now just stay clear of nuts, like I don't even bother with them. But at the time I was kind of, again, I was learning, so I was thinking, oh, it's a whole food. It's, what was that? Oh, in my mind, it was a case of I need to eat a whole food, plant-based diet, nuts fit in there. So I was buying every nut in a supermarket, like every package of nuts, like Brazil nut, cashew nut,
almonds.
yeah, I mean, the list goes on, but every nut I was buying in packs and packs of them, and then I'd just sit and eat a bowl of nuts, you know, it's not a small bowl, just a big bowl of, because I'd grab a small handful of every type of nut that I had in my cupboard, but it all equated to like this huge bowl of nuts and I'd think, oh, I've only had a few of these and a few of these, but it was like I was eating ridiculous amounts. So to cut a long story short, I ended up putting on weight on the vegan diet, and it was only when I kind of I went towards a fruit-based diet and cut out all that fat that wasn't needed that I started to lose weight. So yes, I'm not sure exactly, but 2.5 stone or something since eating a predominantly fruit-based diet.
So altogether you've lost 2.5 stone?
Well, no, I've actually been 20 stone in my lifetime, but I yo-yo dieted when I was younger, so I went up and down. 20 stone was the highest I've been. That's probably something like 6 stone heavier than 6 or 5.5 stone. I'm not sure exactly what I weigh now, but that was my heaviest that I had been. So I'm much lower than that. But what I'm saying is that the weight I've lost on the fruitarian diet
from your vegan days.
Yeah, that's
because I think people think like with veganism, it's healthy. It's much healthier than the standard diet, and in many ways it is, but at the same time you've got junk food vegans, which I used to be one and no longer am, but so you've gone from like a standard diet to a vegan diet, but you're eating tons of fake cheeses, fake meats, bread, tons of like fake chocolate and sweets. So even though you're doing something good for the animals, for your health, you're not going to see that much improvement. You'll see some improvement because you cut out dairy and meat, but you're still putting a lot of sugar into your body, a lot of fat, salt, all the things that the manufacturers put into these vegan alternatives to make them taste good. So yes, that's why fruitarianism is the way.
In our opinion.
In our opinion. Okay, so just really quickly, because we've been talking for ages.
Yeah,
so this book here, Your Natural Diet, Alive, Right and Raw Foods by Dr. T.C. Fry and David Klein. And actually you're doing a course that I've been talking